The unyielding echo of history is not merely a collection of dates. It's not just a list of kings and queens or battles won and lost. It is the story of us. It breathes, it speaks to us across the years if we are willing to listen. These stories, these echoes from the past, shape who we are. They inform our understanding of the world and guide our decisions, both big and small. The narratives we inherit, the tales we tell ourselves about where we've come from, become the bedrock of our present. Therefore, the accuracy of these stories is of paramount importance. It is a sacred trust. When history is told truly, it offers profound lessons. It can illuminate the darkest corners of human nature. It can also showcase our greatest capacities for courage, for sacrifice, for change. An honest accounting of the past helps us to avoid repeating the mistakes of those who came before. It allows us to build a better future, one founded on genuine understanding rather than convenient fictions. Without this commitment to truth, we risk stumbling blindly, guided by distorted maps of a past that never truly was. We become vulnerable to manipulation, and the lessons learned in hardship are tragically lost to time. The pursuit of historical truth is an ongoing endeavor. It is rarely simple. It requires diligence, a willingness to confront uncomfortable facts, and an openness to re-evaluating what we thought we knew. New evidence emerges. Different voices, long silenced, begin to speak. The tapestry of the past becomes richer, more complex, and ultimately more truthful. This complexity is not a weakness, it is a strength. It reflects the multifaceted reality of human experience, a reality that resists easy simplification. It demands our attention and our respect. Understanding history accurately is therefore not an academic exercise confined to dusty archives. It is a vital civic responsibility. It empowers us to be informed citizens. It helps us to discern patterns, to understand the roots of current conflicts, and to appreciate the long journey of human progress with all its triumphs and its setbacks. When we seek the truth in history, we are not just looking backward, we are in a very real sense preparing ourselves for the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead, ensuring our steps are guided by wisdom. The stories of conflict, of war, are particularly susceptible to distortion. In times of great crisis, clarity is often the first casualty. Narratives are crafted, sometimes deliberately, sometimes through the fog of confusion, to serve specific ends. A simple story can be a powerful weapon. It can rally a nation, it can demonize an enemy, it can justify immense sacrifice. But these simple stories often mask a far more complicated reality. They can gloss over inconvenient truths, ignore dissenting voices, and reduce multifaceted events to black and white. This is where misinformation begins its insidious work. Misinformation often takes root in the soil of fear and uncertainty. During wartime, people crave clear explanations. They seek villains and heroes. Propaganda, in its many forms, readily supplies these. Leaders may make bold claims, painting a picture of righteous struggle against an evil foe. The media, sometimes complicit, sometimes itself misled, can amplify these messages. The desire for a unified front, for national cohesion, can inadvertently suppress critical thinking. Questions are discouraged, doubts are cast as disloyalty. And so, a version of events, often incomplete or actively falsified, becomes the accepted truth for many. Moreover, once a particular narrative about a war takes hold, it can be incredibly difficult to dislodge. It becomes part of the national memory, passed down through generations. Textbooks may repeat it, monuments may celebrate it, anniversaries may reinforce it. To challenge such a deeply embedded story can feel like an attack on one's own identity, on the sacrifices of ancestors. Yet if these foundational stories are flawed, if they are built on misinformation, then our understanding of ourselves and our place in the world is also compromised. The echoes of these misinformed narratives continue to reverberate long after the guns fall silent. The simplification of complex events is a natural human tendency. We seek patterns. We desire coherence. But in the context of war, this drive for simplicity can be dangerous. It can lead to a profound misunderstanding of causes, of consequences, of the true human cost. It can prevent us from learning the vital lessons that each conflict, however tragic, might offer. Recognizing how misinformation takes root, how it is nurtured and spread, is the first crucial step towards uncovering a more complete and honest understanding of why nations go to war and what truly happens when they do. The American Civil War is often remembered through a romanticized lens. We hear tales of brother against brother, a tragic conflict of principle and valor on both sides. While courage and sacrifice were indeed present in abundance, this popular narrative often obscures the war's fundamental cause. For decades, a carefully constructed story, known as the Lost Cause, sought to downplay the role of slavery. It argued that the war was primarily about states' rights, about differing economic systems, or about preserving a noble way of life. This was a profound and damaging misrepresentation of the historical record. The declarations of secession from southern states themselves spoke unequivocally. They cited the preservation and protection of the institution of slavery as their primary motivation for leaving the Union. The Confederate Vice President, Alexander H. Stephens, in his famous Cornerstone speech, declared that the Confederacy was founded upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. To ignore such explicit statements is to ignore the very heart of the conflict. The war was fought to preserve the Union, yes, but the Union was threatened by the issue of slavery. The Lost Cause narrative gained traction in the decades following the war. It served to assuage Southern pride and to facilitate national reconciliation, but at a terrible cost. It sanitized the brutal reality of chattel slavery. It minimized the suffering of millions of enslaved African Americans. It allowed for the rise of Jim Crow segregation and decades of racial injustice, built upon the lie that the Confederate cause was somehow noble and just, rather than a defense of human bondage. This misinformed understanding of the Civil War has had long and devastating consequences for American society. Understanding the American Civil War accurately means confronting the centrality of slavery. It means acknowledging the moral imperative that drove the Union cause even as it was imperfectly realized. It means remembering not just the battles and the generals, but the millions whose freedom was at stake. By peeling away the layers of misinformation, by challenging the comforting myths, we arrive at a more difficult but far more truthful understanding of this pivotal moment in American history. The echoes of this conflict and the misinformation surrounding it continue to shape race relations and political discourse in the United States to this very day. World War I is often presented with a deceptively simple starting point: the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in Sarajevo. This single act, we are told, was the spark that ignited the flames of a global conflict. While the assassination was undoubtedly the immediate catalyst, to focus solely on this event is to misunderstand the deep and complex forces that had been drawing Europe towards war for decades. The continent was a powder keg, long before Gavrilo Princip fired his fateful shots. The assassination was merely the match thrown onto an already smouldering pyre of competing ambitions. A web of intricate and often secret alliances crisscrossed Europe. These agreements, designed to provide security, instead created a rigid system where a conflict between two nations could rapidly draw in many others. The Triple Entente of Britain, France and Russia stood opposed to the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria, Hungary and Italy. An attack on one was considered an attack on all, creating a domino effect that proved impossible to stop once the crisis began. This alliance system transformed a regional dispute in the Balkans into a continent-wide and eventually worldwide conflagration of unprecedented scale and horror. Furthermore, rampant nationalism fueled tensions. Many European powers harbored imperial ambitions, seeking to expand their territories and influence across the globe. This competition for colonies and resources bred suspicion and rivalry. An aggressive arms race, particularly between Britain and Germany in naval power, further heightened anxieties. Each nation felt compelled to build up its military strength, not for defense alone, but as a demonstration of power and prestige. This militaristic culture created an environment where war was seen by some not as a last resort, but as an inevitable, even desirable test of national virility and strength. The road to World War I was paved with miscalculations, diplomatic failures, and a widespread underestimation of the destructive power of modern industrialized warfare. Leaders on all sides believed the war would be short, a jolly good scrap over by Christmas. Few foresaw the years of brutal trench warfare, the millions of casualties, or the profound social and political upheaval that would follow. The simple story of an assassination masks this complex interplay of long-term factors, alliances, imperialism, nationalism, and militarism, that truly set the stage for the cataclysm. Grasping this complexity is essential to understanding its tragic unfolding. Section 5. Vietnam. The quagmire of misconceptions. You know, the Vietnam War remains one of the most divisive and misunderstood conflicts in modern history. For many Americans, it was, well, presented as a noble crusade to halt the spread of communism in Southeast Asia, a key battleground in the Cold War. The domino theory was a prevalent idea. If South Vietnam fell to communism, other nations in the region would inevitably follow. But this narrative, however, significantly oversimplified the motivations of the Vietnamese people and the complex political landscape of the region. It failed to fully account for the deep-seated desire for national independence in Vietnam, a country with a long history of resisting foreign domination. Now the official justifications for escalating American involvement, particularly the Gulf of Tonkin incident in August 1964, have since come under intense scrutiny. Initial reports claimed unprovoked attacks by North Vietnamese torpedo boats on US destroyers. These reports formed the basis for the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, granting President Lyndon B. Johnson broad authority to wage war. However, subsequent evidence and declassified documents have revealed that the second alleged attack likely never occurred, and the circumstances of the first were more ambiguous than initially portrayed. This misinformation, whether intentional or a result of confusion, played a crucial role in deepening American commitment to a long and costly war. The perception of the war on the ground also differed vastly from the optimistic reports often conveyed to the American public. The body count metric, used to measure progress, created a perverse incentive and often masked the true strategic situation. The elusive nature of the Viet Cong, the challenging jungle terrain, and the difficulty in distinguishing friend from foe led to immense frustration and tragic consequences for both soldiers and civilians. The idea of winning hearts and minds often clashed with the brutal realities of counterinsurgency warfare, creating a deep credibility gap between official pronouncements and the lived experience of those in Vietnam. Moreover, the nature of the South Vietnamese government, which the United States supported, was often corrupt and lacked widespread popular legitimacy. This further complicated the American mission and alienated many Vietnamese people who might otherwise have been allies. The war was not a simple case of external aggression, but also a civil conflict with deep internal roots. Understanding the Vietnam War requires moving beyond Cold War rhetoric and acknowledging the powerful force of Vietnamese nationalism, the questionable premises for escalation, and the profound disconnect between official narratives and the grim realities on the ground. Section 6. Forgotten Fronts, the Spanish-American War, and the Philippine Insurrection. Lesser-known conflicts, too, are often shrouded in simplified narratives that obscure their true complexities and consequences. The Spanish-American War of 1898 is a prime example. It's frequently remembered by the rallying cry, "Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain." This slogan referred to the explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor, an event widely blamed on Spain at the time, fueling public outrage and calls for war. This narrative cast the United States as a reluctant hero, intervening to liberate Cuba from oppressive Spanish rule and avenge a perceived act of aggression. However, the actual cause of the USS Maine's explosion remains a subject of historical debate, with many modern investigations suggesting an internal accident, perhaps a coal bunker fire, rather than a Spanish mine or torpedo. The yellow journalism of newspapers owned by William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer played a significant role in whipping up war fever, often sensationalizing events and demonizing Spain. Beyond the liberation of Cuba, the war also served American expansionist ambitions, leading to the acquisition of Puerto Rico, Guam, and crucially, the Philippines. This imperial dimension is often downplayed in popular retellings. The conflict did not end with Spain's defeat. What followed in the Philippines was a brutal and largely forgotten war, the Philippine-American War, or the Philippine Insurrection, lasting from 1899 to 1902, with sporadic fighting continuing for years. Having fought alongside the Americans to oust the Spanish, many Filipinos expected independence. Instead, they found themselves under new colonial rule. The ensuing conflict was marked by guerrilla warfare, harsh counter-insurgency tactics by American forces, and significant casualties on both sides, particularly among Filipino civilians. This bloody chapter is often omitted from the heroic narrative of the splendid little war against Spain. The simplified story of the Spanish-American War as a righteous crusade for liberation masks the complex interplay of jingoism, economic interests, and the dawn of American imperialism. It also erases the subsequent struggle of the Filipino people for self-determination. By examining these forgotten fronts and the misinformation surrounding them, we gain a more nuanced understanding of how national myths are constructed and how the pursuit of perceived national interest can lead to outcomes far removed from the proclaimed ideals. These conflicts, though smaller in scale than the Great Wars, carry important lessons about the power of narrative and the consequences of misinformed action. Section 7. The Boer Wars, a bitter struggle misremembered. The Boer Wars, fought between the British Empire and the two independent Boer republics, the South African Republic and the Orange Free State, at the turn of the 20th century, are another example of conflicts whose complexities are often smoothed over by simplified historical accounts. In Britain, they were frequently portrayed as necessary, if regrettable, steps to secure British interests in a vital region rich in gold and diamonds, and to bring enlightenment to supposedly backward Boer farmers. This imperial narrative, however, glossed over the fierce desire of the Boers for independence and their deep resentment of British encroachment. The First Boer War from 1880 to 1881 was a relatively brief affair, ending in a surprising Boer victory that secured their republic's autonomy for a time. The Second Boer War from 1899 to 1902 was a much larger, more brutal and far-reaching conflict. It was triggered by a combination of factors, including disputes over the rights of Uitlanders, foreigners, mainly British, working in the Boer gold mines, British imperial ambitions spearheaded by figures like Cecil Rhodes, and the Boers' determination to resist British domination. The simple narrative of civilizing a recalcitrant people hid the raw pursuit of resources and strategic advantage. One of their most controversial and often misremembered aspects of the Second Boer War was the British use of concentration camps. To counter the Boers' effective guerrilla tactics, the British military implemented a scorched earth policy, burning farms and interning Boer women and children, as well as black Africans in camps. Conditions in these camps were appalling, with overcrowding, poor sanitation, and inadequate food and medical care leading to the deaths of tens of thousands, primarily women and children. While not extermination camps in the Nazi sense, they were a humanitarian disaster, a fact that was initially downplayed or justified by British authorities. The legacy of the Boer Wars is complex and continues to resonate in South Africa. The eventual British victory led to the unification of the region into the Union of South Africa in 1910. But it also sowed deep divisions and bitterness that contributed to the later rise of Afrikaner nationalism and the apartheid system. A simplified understanding that focuses only on British imperial glory or Boer stubbornness fails to capture the intricate web of economic drivers, the human cost of counterinsurgency tactics, and the long-term political consequences for all the peoples of the region. Accurate history demands a reckoning with these uncomfortable truths. Section 8, The Lingering Shadow, Misinformation's Impact on Our World Today. The misinformed wars of the past do not simply reside in history books. They cast long, lingering shadows that stretch into our present, profoundly shaping our world. False narratives, once established, can become deeply ingrained in a nation's psyche, influencing its identity, its foreign policy, and its relationships with other countries. When a nation's understanding of a past conflict is built on half-truths or outright fabrications, its ability to make sound judgments in current international affairs can be severely compromised. Old grievances, fueled by distorted historical accounts, can easily be reignited, leading to renewed suspicion and hostility. Consider how national identity is often forged in the crucible of war. Stories of heroism, sacrifice, and righteous victory become foundational myths. If these myths are based on misinformation, for example, Exaggerating one's own innocence or the enemy's villainy, or ignoring inconvenient atrocities, they can foster a sense of uncritical nationalism. This can make a populace more susceptible to manipulation by leaders who evoke these misremembered glories to justify new adventures or to demonize new perceived enemies. A citizenry unaware of the true complexities and costs of past wars is less likely to question the drums of war when they begin to beat again. Furthermore, misinformation about past wars can directly impact international relations. If one nation consistently views another through the lens of a distorted historical narrative, perhaps one where the other nation is always portrayed as the aggressor or as inherently untrustworthy, then genuine dialogue and peaceful resolution of disputes become exceedingly difficult. Historical revisionism, when used as a political tool to deny past wrongs or to assert unsubstantiated claims, can poison diplomatic efforts and create enduring enmity. The echoes of misremembered conflicts can thus become a recurring obstacle to global peace and cooperation, perpetuating cycles of mistrust. The broader implications extend to how societies grapple with justice and reconciliation. If the true causes and consequences of a war, particularly civil conflicts or wars involving colonial oppression, are obscured by misinformation, then genuine healing cannot occur. Victims may feel their suffering is unacknowledged, while perpetrators or their descendants may cling to narratives that absolve them of responsibility. This failure to confront the past honestly can lead to simmering resentments that undermine social cohesion and prevent a nation from truly moving forward. An unexamined past, distorted by falsehoods, remains a heavy burden on the present. Section 9. Our shared past, our collective responsibility, seeking clarity. History, then, is not a static monument. It is a living conversation, a constant process of inquiry and re-evaluation. Our understanding of past wars, with all their pain and complexity, is too important to be left to simplified slogans or nationalistic myths. We have a collective responsibility to seek clarity, to question the narratives handed down to us, and to engage with the past in an honest and critical manner. This is not about assigning blame from the vantage point of the present. It is about understanding with as much accuracy as possible how and why these devastating events occurred. The path to a more truthful understanding requires embracing multiple perspectives. History is rarely the story of a single voice, a single victor. We must listen to the accounts of soldiers and civilians, of leaders and the Iliad, of those who supported the war and those who opposed it. We must examine the evidence from all sides, including documents, diaries, letters and oral histories that may challenge our preconceived notions. It is in the interplay of these diverse viewpoints that a richer, more nuanced picture begins to emerge. This willingness to engage with complexity is the hallmark of a mature historical consciousness. Critical examination is our most powerful tool against misinformation. We must learn to identify bias, to scrutinize sources, and to be wary of narratives that offer overly simplistic explanations for complex events. This means fostering historical literacy in our education systems and in public discourse. It means supporting the work of historians who dedicate their lives to uncovering and interpreting the past, even when their findings are uncomfortable or unpopular. The pursuit of historical truth is an ongoing journey, one that demands intellectual rigor and moral courage from all of us. Ultimately, by striving to understand misinformed wars more accurately, we do more than just correct the historical record. We equip ourselves to be better citizens of the world. We learn to recognize the warning signs of propaganda and manipulation. We develop a deeper appreciation for the human cost of conflict and the preciousness of peace. I invite you, the reader, to reflect on other conflicts that you believe are widely misunderstood. What stories need re-examining? Let us continue this vital conversation. For in the honest contemplation of our shared past lies the best hope for a more informed and peaceful future.